Now let's build a WinForm control library because we want to host it in WPF. So to do that, let's take a new project. Let's search for control library, and what you get here is a simple Windows form control library using C# and .NET framework. So we'll pick this project. It's going to generate DLL again. Let's call it as some data control. Let's quickly click on create. Now keep it in mind, this user control is just going to have what we call it as a library specific contents, which means it's going to be a DLL. As I said, it's not something which is going to be exe. So here it's like a code is going to go and have some visual, since we are going to go and build something which is a reusable UI and reusable code. So default name for this user control is user control 1. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change this name to something called as maybe DC over here as in data control. It will ask me to if at all we need to change it all over. I'll say yes. So it has changed almost all over. There's a partial class DC that we have here, and then in the design code behind you will also see there is another partial class DC that we have here. Okay, now in this design what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some control from WinForm. So one of the very popular most control that we have in WinForm, which is called as data grid view. I'm going to use some sort of data source to showcase some sort of table data or SQL Server table data into the UI. So for that, what I'm going to do is, in this project, I'm going to add one database. So let me quickly refer to some database. So in order to create database, what I need to do is, I need to connect to the server first. By default, I already have SQL Server installed on this machine. So what I'm going to do, in order to find the server name, if I don't know, or if you don't know the server name, what you can do is, you can go to rules and options. And then there is section called as database tools. Under data connections, you can very well find out the local SQL Server installed on your machine. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to right click on data connections in Server Explorer here. I'm going to say add a connection, and I'm going to put a server name over here. Again, you can pick up the existing database if any over here. There's by default one master database that we have. So I'm going to select it and I'm going to say test connection. Since it succeeded, I'm going to click on OK. So in this master database, there are tables, which are 0 tables right now in here. I'm going to add one new table. So I'm going to right click here and add a new table. Now I'm going to quickly add certain fields over here. So let's add number, which is integer. Let's add name, which is going to be varchar 50. And let's add address over here, which is again going to be varchar 50 over here. So let's say varchar 50 one more time. Number is going to be a primary key as it is. The table name, we will have it as employee. Let's try updating this table quickly into the database. So it is just going to generate the database. Now you will notice under tables, we will see one table called as EMP. I'm going to simply add some sample data, and we will add couple of lines of records over here. Let's add Mahesh, Pune. Let's add Nilesh, Pune. Let's add Amit, Mumbai. Let's say there are 3 records that we have as of now. Just sample record. Now what we need to do is, in this DC project, I need to showcase that data. So as I said, we have multiple number of ways to showcase the data. One of the easiest way to showcase the data is data grid. So from the toolbox, I am going to drag and drop data grid view. By default, what I'm going to do is I'm going to dock it into a parent container, which means it's going to be a full size control. Now I need to connect to database. So for that purpose, again, if you wish to code, you can very well write the code in the code behind of this design. I wish to simply showcase how this control is rendered into WPF or hosted in WPF. So for that reason, I am not going to put time or efforts in coding in the code behind. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply create a data source, which is going to be a lookless control, which is going to produce the code for data connectivity. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to click on add project source. Right now I need to connect to a database. not web service or not some sort of object collections also, then what is it that we would like to construct is we would like to create a data set which is kind of a replica of the server side data on the client side. Then it's going to ask me which database you would like to connect to. I'll pick up this database, which is master database. It will ask me, would you like to store this connection string into the configuration file, that is app config file? I'll say yes. Then by default it will store it by the name or key called as master connection string. It will pull all the data, and then it shows me these are the tables available in that database. I'll pick up EMP and finally click on finish. Now you will see what we have here is by default structure of the table is available and the data of the table will be pulled as and when we run the application. Now one more time, what you see here at the bottom, these are lookless controls. Now if I compile this project, you will find out it simply generates the DLL file. So if it generates the DLL, can we simply run this? In bin debug, you will notice there is something called as data control.dll. But things to understand here is we can't run this DLL directly, but in WPF we saw CC control or demo animation, we couldn't run those DLLs directly. When it comes to WinForm control, and if I just click on start, you will see that WinForm control actually can run the WinForm control library itself, which means Visual Studio can run this library. How is it possible? Because this is the feature of Visual Studio, that is if you are constructing a Windows control library or Windows form control library, and if you would like to test it, then by default Visual Studio will provide some sort of test application which you see in front of you, and by default you will notice that it's a DC control. It is going to have some test kit on the right with which you can quickly test what should be the background color, what should be the foreground color and all. So right now if I just click on if I just click on changing the color, so maybe I'll pick up some different color than what we already have. Okay, this doesn't look good because I don't have any background because I have docked it completely. Anyway, so by default you will find out that control libraries can be run directly. So if I just go and say don't dock it in the container, I'll just increase the size a bit and then we will try running it one more time. So if you try changing the color over here, let's active caption, you will find out the background color changes to whatever you said. So you will find out instead of you testing this in the library and then hosting it and then maybe seeing it in UI, if you don't like it, then you will have to go back to library and do some changes and then come back to a host application again. So to reduce this process time or testing time, what Visual Studio has done is Visual Studio has given you already a host application for this Windows control library. But then keep it in mind, this is not applicable to default WPF controls or for that matter for any normal DLL in case of .NET. So I'm just going to dock it one more time into the parent container. We don't have any kind of data, I believe, pulled. And now what we have to do is we will simply have to test this application. So here is what we will do. We already have compiled this project and we already saw the DLL. Now I need to take this WinForm DLL into WPF application.